coming off of a disappointing playoff loss to the San Francisco 49ers in the divisional round. I think they've done some good things this offseason, though. There's two moves. Yeah, two moves in particular for the Cowboys. Very simple. Stephon Gilmore and Brandon Cooks. Trading for both players. Last year we see they were 12-5, projected for 9.24 wins per PFF's projected wins. But I think adding receiver depth with Brandon Cooks, cornerback depth with Stephon Gilmore, did that early in the offseason, allowed them to have flexibility in the draft, and I think it's, a good offseason, I think, for Dallas heading into this year.
No, I do as well. Like I those two moves are really interesting, really good ones. Stephon Gilmore has shown in the last couple of years he can still play at a really high level. Maybe he isn't where he was when he was the best cornerback in the NFL for a few seasons, but he's still a really high-level corner. And now you're not – it's a bit like James Bradbury where his role is completely different now. Trevon Diggs is on the other side. Gilmore can go to being more of a sort of secondary threat, secondary coverage guy. And as we know, cornerback generally, secondary is a weak link type of enterprise. Like the worst player is the problem, not the best. So should massively upgrade the entire secondary across the board. And then Brandon Cooks, I think, can have a similar kind of impact on offense. Like it gives them somebody else genuinely concerning for a defense to worry about so that CeeDee Lamb can't be the focus of everything. And also, independent of those moves, Michael Gallup is another year removed from the injury that really held him back last year, I think. They paid him significant money for a reason, and it was just that he came off an injury and it sort of looked like a bad deal. Jalen Tolbert has been making a ton of plays in training camp as well, a guy that I really liked last year, didn't do anything basically as a rookie, but might be a Romeo Doubs situation where it just, it's going to take some receivers time. We're sort of spoiled by how seamlessly a lot of wide receivers can come into the NFL and get cracking right away. But I'm sure some still require, a year of seasoning before they're able to show what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, just to let's stay on the offense for a little bit here. There was points last year. CeeDee Lamb, by the way, emerged as the true number one, seventh most valuable receiver in the NFL last year per PFF WAR. Had a very good grade. But tactically, we saw what happened on a week-to-week basis when they did not have Amari Cooper and you did not have Michael Gallup healthy. It was too much CeeDee Lamb. And then it became Dalton Schultz, right? So in 2021, Dalton Schultz at tight end was a good fourth option in your pass game. Well, there was a lot of games where Schultz had to become your number two option. This year, Schultz is out, but CD gets to be the number one. Brandon Cooks, who's been productive since the 80s with every single quarterback, right? Brandon Cooks is a very good, solid receiver. Every system, the guy produces. Cooks as a 2, Gallup as a 2A, 2B, and you don't need a Dalton Schultz now. Jake Ferguson, who's actually a little bit more athletic, he gets to be your number 4 target as a second-year tight end here. Luke Schoonmaker, who they drafted tight end in the second round as well, got a little bit of athleticism there. We'll also see a lot more just straight-up Tony Pollard touches once he's back and healthy. It's a potentially explosive offense on paper with that personnel, a better-looking offense than it was last year. Then the question becomes, Kellen Moore is out. A lot of mixed reviews on Kellen Moore. Some people think he's great. Some people think he's terrible because you just always have to blame the offensive coordinator if everything's not great. But he's a good offensive coordinator overall, and Mike McCarthy's now taken over the play calling.
Yeah, it's funny, both sides of the Kellen Moore thing, the Chargers where he's gone to and the Cowboys who've just gotten rid of him, like both teams, fan bases seem to think that they're now going to be more aggressive. One because they've gotten rid of Kellen Moore and one because they brought him in, which I guess is possible. They can be both true at the same time, but I don't think they will be.
I think it's in different ways. The Cowboys last year, they've had a lot of high early down run percentage numbers, and the Chargers just have low average depth of target numbers. Right. I think those are the things that each team is focused on. The interesting thing about McCarthy taking over plays, when he got run out of Green Bay, basically, it was because him and Rodgers, they probably just hit the end of their run. Offense seemed a little oversimplified, maybe too reliant on receivers just winning one-on-ones, not enough schemed throws for Rodgers. We saw when Matt LaFleur came in, more schemed throws. Rodgers goes back to MVP status. That would be my question about this Cowboys offense. Are we just expecting CD and Cooks and Gallup to just win one-on-ones the whole time, or will there be a good combination of schemed plays and also relying on your playmakers?
The other thing I think that's going to be fascinating is the backfield, because we've been campaigning for so many years for Tony Pollard to become the lead back, where instead, they were sort of piling more into this sunk cost of Zeke Elliott. Like, he's got the big contract, we need to keep justifying that so Pollard can't get any kind of bigger role. Now, like, literally the explanation for this dynamic is flipped 180. Like, before it was, well, we don't know if Pollard can carry the load, we don't know if blah blah. Now Jerry Jones is saying things like, when he's being asked, can Tony Pollard get this many touches, blah blah blah, he's sort of answering, well, let me ask you this. Can we afford not to give him this number of touches given how good the guy is? Look at his production. Look at his, efficiency. Look how explosive he is. We can't afford not to give him 300 carries in a season. But it is an unknown. I mean, as much as we've been saying, let's find out where that line is, where you get diminishing returns with Tony Pollard, we don't know where the ceiling is of what he can handle. And maybe it is the full workload, and actually you're going to get a massive upgrade because Pollard is going to be the alpha and he's just one of the best running backs in the NFL. But if there's any substance to the idea that to get the most out of Pollard, you need to restrict his workload to, a bit part, or not even a bit part, but like 50% of a bell cow's workload. Who's the other 50%? Is it really Deuce Vaughn?
Give me Deuce Vaughn. Yeah.
So the backfield would be explosive, lightweight, sort of skinny, live Tony Pollard and Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah. I think it's nice to have the old school Thunder and Lightning backfield. I think that's fun for stories. I think there's an element to, I love the Packers mix of having an A.J. Dillon and just having a different type of person to tackle, because they've got speed on the perimeter and all of a sudden you have to tackle A.J. Dillon, right? I like that sometimes. It also, I think, could be overrated. Do you need to have a Thunder and Lightning? Why can't you have Lightning and Lightning? Why can't you have that?
I mean, you can.
I think it's fine.
Nobody's
I think
stopping you.
Deuce Vaughn deserves touches. That's all I'm saying. So roll with Tony Pollard. Let him be the alpha guy, whatever that looks like in 2023.
Right.
But I think Deuce Vaughn, he's competing with Malik Davis, Rico Dowdle. I think Deuce Vaughn could be that guy. So I like this offense. Dak, we've talked a lot about Dak. He had his lowest grade in years last year. And I think how did we make it this far without talking about his interception totals? We try not to jump
Led the league
in interceptions and the whole deal. He did have a higher turnover-worthy play percentage than he'd had in previous years. I don't think interceptions are a problem for Dak. I think they're just an overblown stat anyway. But overall, Dak's performance was inconsistent. I think the Cowboys the last couple of years have had spurts of play that are elite. Spurts of play where they are just dominant, both sides of the ball, including especially on the offense. They need some level of consistency. And again, that's where I think the Cooks addition helps that consistency, both on a week-to-week basis as teams take away CeeDee Lamb. Where did a lot of those interceptions come from? A bunch of them were miscommunications, forcing it to CeeDee Lamb, throwing into fuzzy pictures, whether it was Dak's fault or not. You don't have to do that as much when you have other guys getting open. So I think the consistency of the offense will be better. Dak will have a good season. The offensive line looks solid as long as they all stay healthy. Zach Martin's back. So I'm liking this Dallas offense for sure.
Tell you what I find interesting about the Dak Prescott interception stuff. So he had 15 interceptions last season and 18 turnover-worthy plays. This is just the regular season. And that number gets actually closer together. So 17 interceptions and 20 turnover-worthy plays when you factor in the playoffs. So essentially he got very unlucky in terms of turnover luck. Not quite at the Matt Ryan butt pick season where I think he actually had more interceptions than turnover-worthy plays in that ridiculous year, but getting in that direction, right? But in his, what was it, 6 years before that combined, he was actually wildly lucky in terms of that ratio. Like, he went from one end of the spectrum to the other. For 6 years, he'd actually had a way lower number of interceptions than even the average ratio of interceptions to turnover-worthy plays, and then went from that to like one of the most unlucky quarterbacks in the NFL. So I don't have a good explanation for the first 6 years as much as the last year.
Yeah, and that's why it's overblown, man. I mean, when you use PFF stats, when you look at turnover-worthy plays being that close to interceptions, and of course turnover-worthy plays include fumbles. Right. When they're that close to interceptions, there's some bad luck happening. But when they're far apart, like Geno Smith, second in the league in turnover-worthy plays and fewer than 10 interceptions, there's some good luck happening.
Right.
Those things tend to even themselves out over time.
But
That's
6
all.
years is a long time to be consistently skewing in one direction, which was the confusing aspect of that to me.
Gotcha. Defensive side of the ball. Dan Quinn is back. He's been teased as a head coaching candidate over the last couple of years. Micah Parsons heads into year 3. Year 3 for Micah Parsons, supposedly a full-time edge now. Even though most of the time last year he was a full-time edge, it's a little bit different. So that they did have some games where he played linebacker last year. So that's his role now. He's put on weight and the whole deal. Is Micah Parsons going to be the most unblockable edge in the league this year? There's a chance that he is, maybe over Myles Garrett, the Boses, and anyone else, TJ Watt. But you've got Parsons, you've got DeMarcus Lawrence up front, and then in the draft, for the first time in a long time, they addressed defensive tackle with Mazi Smith. And he had a couple good plays in preseason week 1. Defensive line looks really good, and Dan Quinn has done a nice job evolving his defense in the last couple of years. Uses more stunts than anyone else in the league, knows how to move players around and maximize them. It looks like another good defense for the Cowboys. And then, as we mentioned, Stephon Gilmore plus Trevon Diggs at cornerback this year.